expert panel with us today. We've got Rajesh Pagga, Suhas Suljaputkar, Sudhir Soni, and Dinkar Pagar. I'll quickly introduce them and then move on to the next part of our webinar. Rajesh Pagga has been with experience in various sectors of industry, both in India and global. He's also been closely involved in the development of regulation with governments. Welcome, Pagga, sir. Our next expert panelist is Mr. Dinkar Pagar, who has a wide and long experience in the field of resources with specializations in industrial relationship. Government of Maharashtra for about 35 years in various positions, such as the Joint Labour Commissioner in Mumbai, Additional Commissioner of Labour in Pune and Mumbai Board, and Deputy Commissioner of Labour at Mumbai and Nasik. He's also been the chairman of various Mathadi Labour Board and Security Guard boards in the state of Maharashtra. He brings a unique perspective to this webinar here. Welcome, Mr. Pagar. Our next expert is Mr. Soni, Sudhir Soni. He's an alumnus of the Doctrine Institute of Social Science and the Roth School of Business. He's a well-rounded professional with extensive experience in industrial relationships, HR, and general management.
Hey, JD.
Voice is breaking up.
Audio is breaking.
Yeah, Jaideep, your voice is breaking.
Sudhir Soni, welcome, sir. And moving on, our fourth panelist, in-house expert, Suhas Suljaputkar. He's the founder director of Legasis Services and managing partner of Legasis. He has worked as an in-house counsel with companies like Blue Dart, SR, and Enron. Suhas is a member and on committee of several bodies like United Nations Global Compact Network of India, ISACA, the Global Tourism Council, the Maratha Chamber. He's also a trustee of a retail association called Train, and most recently, a member of the Blockchain Council. Welcome all four of you. Before we move on to your section of the webinar, we'd like to take a moment to recognize our frontline COVID-19 warriors. To set the tone and talk about one such body who's been absolutely on the front line, the police force, we have none other than our Executive Director, Ramesh Sharma. Mr. Sharma is IPS, a retired Director General of Police. He's been decorated with the Prime Minister's Medal for Meritorious Service and the President's Medal for Distinguished Service. He has served the nation in the border posts such as Ladakh and Jammu and Kashmir, Nagaland and Manipur as well. He's also served as a diplomat in the High Commission of India, Ottawa, Canada. Most recently, he co-authored a book on combating corruption in India, which was published by Cambridge University. Mr. Sharma, would you like to speak a few words about how the police force is on the front line to take us out of the COVID-19 pandemic? Over to you, Mr. Sharma.
Thank you, JD, and thank you to all the participants and welcome all. I'll start with a little narration of an experience that I had in 2009 when I was Additional Director General of Police, CID. And I was very fond of organizing workshops on various social and criminal related issues. So I was organizing this workshop called on juvenile delinquency with the chief of the UNICEF. And the UNICEF chief was rather surprised that the police should be organizing such a seminar. And he asked me that if we had a social worker wing, my instantaneous and spontaneous response was that every police officer is a social worker. Now, it took perhaps that a fact that I had known all along my life is perhaps now in wide view of all the people of this country, where officers have really come up to perform the role of social workers. And in this respect, I salute all these serving police officers who, at the risk of their lives, day in and day out, without caring for the number of hours. And I'm saying number of hours, for example, you can see from the fact that a city like Pune has only 9,000 police personnel with a population about 50, 60 lakhs. And similarly, Maharashtra has a population of almost 11 crores and 2 lakh of policemen. So obviously, even the ratio wise and the presence on the road to enforce lockdown, which in any case, no person likes to be stopped. And that has been the most difficult part of these frontline warriors, to persuade people to come out on the roads, because the curfew is in progress. And this has been the biggest stress point for the police officers, as verified and proven by the survey carried out by Pune police, where 45% of the respondents say that their biggest stress is from enforcing the curfew and lockdown. Apart from enforcing the lockdown and maintaining order and security in the hospitals, protecting healthcare workers, and enforcing quarantine, enforcing social distancing and use of masks, etc. I mean, the police has really come out with flying colors in terms of providing the necessary help and assistance to people in distress. There are a number of stories you must have heard about, number of videos you have seen, number of examples that have been given out. But to broadly categorize them, they have ensured that despite the lockdown, the supply chain continues to be maintained to whatever extent is possible under the guidelines provided by the government. And most of all, they have been very active in helping out the migrants. Though we see pictures of migrants in distress and all that, but the bad story always comes out. That is always have been my experience all my life as a police officer. But the good stories, very few people want to tell. And I have, in fact, I spoke to Commissioner of Police Pune, having been based in Pune, and he said that he has got registered all the migrants with their phone numbers and addresses, etc. And systematically through trains, they are sending them off. They're providing them food, they're providing them shelter, they're providing them medical services, and they have tied up with 163 NGOs. So this is the same. I'm giving an example of Pune because I personally spoke, so that I can give you the experience of those who are actually leaders, who are actually in the field. And they have been doing an excellent job on this front. But while there are stories and the facts are there that police officers have not gone home, they don't want to go back home because they will infect their families and children. There are stories where police officers are sitting outside their houses and the food is being served to them so that they have the food and then again go back to duty. The result, this has been, of course, taken its toll, and Maharashtra itself is perhaps contributed the maximum number of infections that the police officers have suffered, 1,273, in which 11 have died. 291 have recovered. Whereas all over India, there are 3,061 infections and 223 have died. So all in all, I think police has done a remarkable job, has come up to the occasion, because my experience has always been that whatever be the nature of crisis, whatever be the size of the crisis, and this is a crisis which is worldwide and across India, police is always the first responder. And my hats off, my tribute to them, and from the on behalf of Legasis and all the panelists here, I wish to convey our gratitude and heartful thanks to these frontline warriors, and we are always ready to help them out in whatever way we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Truly appreciate sharing those insights. I mean, for all of us, it just seems that the police force is there to kind of help us with all the barricading and all, but I think they're doing much more. And thank you so much for giving us that perspective. We have three frontline warriors here with us, and we'd like to take a minute to kind of recognize them. The first one is Mr. Shiv Prasad Sharma. Sir, welcome. He's a resident of Nagpur, Maharashtra, currently serving as the PSI with Maharashtra Police in Nagpur city, and is associated with the Special Branch Security Department. That makes his job even more difficult. But before we request him to talk about his COVID-19 experience, I'd just like to add that he's completed close to 38 years in serving the nation with the Maharashtra Police. He is a brown belt holder in karate and has appeared in arm wrestling championship on a national level. During COVID-19, he is responsible for securing the quarantine centers, and he's been leading this from the front personally. Welcome, Mr. Shiv Prasad Sharma. Could you please take a minute to tell us about your COVID-19 experience? Looks like he's having some audio issues. We'll request him to kind of fix that and join us. Sir, thank you so much for all your work on the front line. We express our deep gratitude to you. The next we would like to recognize our siblings, Dr. Maya Karnani, who's joined us over here, and Dr. Captain Manoj Karnani. Dr. Maya Karnani has completed her MBBS and is currently pursuing emergency medicine at Apollo Hospitals, Navi Mumbai. She's been at the hospital for the last 60 days straight and has not returned home. She puts in more than 12-hour shifts, be it a day shift or a night shift, completely covered in a PPE. And due to the nature of her specialization, she practically ends up seeing all the patients that come to the emergency ward. Welcome, Maya. His sibling, Dr. Captain Manoj Karnani, could not join us due to the exigencies of his service. He's with the Armed Medical Corps. Right now, he's posted at Nasik. Apart from looking at the COVID-19 patients, he's also detailed to be deployed in case of any emergencies for the civilian charge as well. Maya, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you take a minute to tell us about your COVID-19 experience, please?
Thank you so much. Like the first time we, this was even before like COVID had reached India. We like knew from the China experience, from the European country experiences that, what are the symptoms, and, we had a very brief idea, and it had just reached, I guess the first few cases were in Jaipur, and it was just a joke at that time that no, it's not going to be, such a boom in India because people are not, coming in and stuff like that. But since then to now, it was just like because a pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic is part of disaster management, and that is part of my specialization. It was never a doubt that we were going to be part of it. Like I was going to be part of it. Since that day to this day, we were like completely dedicated. We knew that, once it does boom, once the cases start spiking, once the people start reporting their cases, their symptoms, we knew that the hospitals are going to be, like the OPDs and stuff, anything elective is going to be shut down. And the directives are going to come out, the protocols are going to be in place. So we were all in an overcharge mode, to set up the protocols. All the seniors, all involved, they kept us also in the loop, the juniors, the seniors, everyone, the management. We were always in constant, meetings and stuff, to set up the protocols. And it includes, so because in a disaster, like a pandemic, you have to screen patients, you have to triage them, and knowing that such patients, even if presenting with mild symptoms, could, very aggressively aggravate into an unstable state, we knew that all of them would come to us. So knowing that, we would just be there, not knowing whether or not they are positive, it was just something that, it did not scare us or something. It just wanted us to be part of it. Like, I personally realized one thing, that I know I'm not going to be able to go back home. And we just would have to set it up over here. And it's not only me, like most of my team is here in the hospital. So it was never a second thought. It was always like, because we have chosen this specialization, we were more than, prepared for this. Although, yeah, I mean, not so much as, realizing we'll not be able to go home, because all of us had that little advantage every now and then to be able to go back home. But yeah, I think that's the only factor. But apart from that, it has been a very, I don't know how to say it. I mean, fulfilling, and we're just glad that we are, able to contribute. So,
Thank you, Maya, and thank you for sharing that personal experience. I mean, coming straight from someone who's been on the front line gives us a better perspective. I truly appreciate the work that you're doing there. I mean, we express gratitude. I hope Mr. Shiv Prasad Sharma has been able to get his audio. Looks like he's still facing a difficulty. We'd like to move on and recognize our third person for the evening, Varshani Ramakrishnan. Welcome. She is a design strategist, artist, and a founder of multidisciplinary design studio called New Folder. Her work spans across brand experience, accessory design, and illustrations. She applies design thinking in various fields. She's completed her master's from the National Institute of Fashion Technology, Chennai. Very recently, she created a massive art mural, about 100 feet by 50 feet, on the walls of the Tambram railway station entrance, to convey a big salute to the frontline and essential workers of the COVID-19 lockdown. I think artists are bringing what we need on the front line, a lot of color and positivity to all of this. Varshani, thank you so much. We would like you to talk about your recent artwork that you've created. All of you see on the slide as well. Varshani, we took the liberty of putting a picture of that on the slide over here.
Thank you, Jaideep. I feel good. You call me like frontline worker, and I feel proud. Many times we designers, we have this thought that, we are not creating anything for the society. We are not creating anything big that's like, making a difference to the world. But, it'll be randomly like making a wedding invite design, or it can be a calendar design or something, which sometimes we feel it's not that big to create a change in the world. But this project, which when it came to me, it was like, I felt really satisfied that I am trying to make something which is significant to the people, and especially the frontline workers in this case. So this was a project, it was done along with Nalanda Way Foundation and Renault Nissan Technology Business Center, India. So our concept was to represent the common people, giving a salute to the frontline workers, as in the doctors, the sanitary workers, the policemen, and even the small-time workers like the water can, newspaper delivery men. So we didn't want to miss out on those few people that who actually worked very silently during the lockdown. So this was a very good opportunity for me to do something on the social end. And there was a lot of research and a lot of collectively we did a lot of research, read a lot of news articles, media publications, and all that to come up with scenes or happenings that were going around during the lockdown, which was very unique to the lockdown. For example, you would find the corona helmet, the railway turning their coaches into isolation wards. So you would not find something like this, which is very unique only to lockdown. You won't find it like commonly during a normal day, right? So so this was this involved a lot of research as well to represent the exact situation what was going on. But we were very particular that we never wanted any sad scenes or anything, any scene that would put down the spirit of people. We only wanted it to be very positive. So I even used colors which would reflect positivity, which people associate with positivity. For example, the rainbows or the South Indian temple gopuram. These are objects which people associate with positivity. So I thought using those colors on a bigger canvas like a railway station would give a shared experience to everyone. Since it's a public canvas, it's available to everyone to view it, and it creates a positive energy out there. That's what I felt while doing this. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Varshani, and truly appreciate you spreading positivity through artwork. I hope we have the audio back for Mr. Prasad Sharma. Are you able to talk to us? No. Looks like he's still facing difficulty. We'll figure out a way of fixing that for him and getting him towards the end of this webinar. But thank you so much, Mr. Sharma, Manoj, Maya, and Varshani for joining us. Feel free to stay on. We'll move on to the next section of today, the webinar. Requesting Suhas to take on the reins from here. Suhas, over to you.
Thank you very much, JD. Thanks to all the frontliners. Thanks to those who are giving courage to the frontliners. Thank you very much. We are here because you are doing what you are doing for all of us. Thanks a lot. Having said that, I just want to kind of start off the webinar. Please feel free to continue to stay with us. But if you get bored with the legal niceties, please, you can drop out. Having said that, I must kind of read this out and make this very, very clear that this webinar is only for general awareness. We're not giving any legal advice or opinion. Pandemic 2020 or whatever you call COVID-19 is a situation that's very dynamic. It's uncertain. Everything is unpredictable. And the risks that we may not identify today or we may identify today may drastically vary by the time we get up tomorrow morning. So within a very short span, things might drastically change. Therefore, our request is consider this as a general awareness webinar. We're not asking you to base your decisions based on the discussions that we would have today. On couple of matters, we will take an eagle's view. We will go in depth and look at what the approaches should be. But it's not an exhaustive webinar touching upon all the elements of employer-employee relationship. Also, I would like to say that we may expect a new law that may come up today, covering up the COVID-19 situation. There is already a talk at the government level going on saying that there should be COVID code that India should legislate, because we have too many laws and the current situation is so uncertain, so vulnerable from the point of view of legal misinterpretation that there is a talk. So that act might come with a retrospective effect. So whatever we might discuss here would change completely if that act were to come with retrospective effect. So these are some couple of caveats and warnings. And I think whatever views that we are going to express here, these are individual views. These are not views of our respective organizations. Having said this, the agenda today is what broadly I'm going to lay down. We're going to look at employer-employee relationship. We will talk about during lockdown scenario. We will talk about post-lockdown scenario. We will look at some of the fundamentals such as no work, no pay, layoff, and we will look at some of the recent state amendments and talk about it. The majority of the time we are going to discuss the issues. So I'm going to open up, and I'm going to open up with saying that, Sudhir, and I will go in that order for this first open up, is Mr. Sudhir Soni, Mr. Rajesh Bagga, and Mr. Dinkar Pagar, in that order. So, I mean, what is your first take? In a sense, the employer-employee relationship seems to have undergone a change. COVID seems to be the agent of change, changing this relationship. So how do you look at it, and what's your take, Sudhir? Sudhir, you may have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I never realized I had switched it off. Good evening, everyone. And good evening. And thank you to JD and Suhas for giving this opportunity to be a part of the panel. If I were to just look back to somewhere around March and look at the situation then, nobody would have thought, even as late as 18th, 17th, 18th, 19th March, that we would be really sitting at home almost from the 22nd of March till today, which is what, the 20th of May. And this has led to a sudden kind of a change. It's kind of a pause button which has occurred, in which now almost for 2 months, the supply chains have been disrupted. Factories have been completely shut down, most of them at least.
Sudhir, just a minute.
Yeah.
Just a minute. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the screen share so that we can discuss discuss everything freely.
Okay. You want to stop the screen share?
Yeah.
So there have been any number of issues that have come up because of the lockdown, the commercial activity, the manufacturing activity, the markets, all that has suddenly been stopped. Now, people were not prepared for it. And therefore, there are a huge number of challenges in terms of how am I going to look at the absence of people? How am I going to look at deliveries to customers? How am I, if I'm in retail, what do I do in order to restart operations and get footfalls again as time goes by? And these are several challenges which people are facing. Secondly, there are two types of responses that I have seen happen. One is with regard to the workmen or the bargainable category, the unionized kind of workers, employees that you have in an organization. And second is the non-unionized cadre. Now, I have yet to really come across any organization who is saying, at this point in time, at least, as I'm talking to you right now, that we are going to cut down manpower, or we are going to lay off people, or we are going to retrench people. At least I have not heard any significant or anything at all on that front. What I have heard is looking at two aspects. One is for the workmen, and second is for the management staff. For the workmen, it is more of adjustment of leave to some extent, and re-looking at the compensation package, but definitely not eliminating pay. I haven't seen that happen. Insofar as the white collared are concerned, and especially the senior management, middle management, senior management in an organization is concerned, I'm seeing that there is going to be there are going to be no increments. There may not be any promotions. However, most companies that I know of will honor the kind of incentives or performance bonuses that have been earned during the financial year 2019-20, and that it's only a matter of time as and when the organization starts earning revenue again after a lapse of almost 2 months. Surely there will be the people will look at this deferment to come to an end. There are other organizations where I'm involved. For example, there are export-oriented organizations which are in really bad shape, and that you need to do cost control immediately. So there is an element of, again, I don't see any of them retrenching or laying off people, but I look at them looking at rationalization of salary in such a manner that they're converting fixed salary to variable pay. And then by March 2021, hopefully if the things get better, that will be reimbursed back, repaid to the employees. So overall, I think the organizations have responded in an extremely mature manner, to my mind. I don't see any knee-jerk reactions. I don't see any hire and fire like one hears on television in several countries, people losing jobs, etc. I dare say that it's happening in in our country at least. And on a last note, if I were to look at some of the factories which have reopened, I'm based in Pune, and I know that several factories in Chakan as well as in Pirangut and Ranjangaon have started operation almost now a week or 10 days. The common predicament is that there's no labor. We want to produce, we have orders to fulfill, but 50% of our people have disappeared. And that's really going to be a challenge in terms of fulfillment of orders.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So I think just touching upon the thread that you mentioned there, which is with respect to multinational companies or some of the American companies, European companies panicking, giving knee-jerk reaction, and we have experienced that the backlash happening here in India. So I'm going to request Mr. Bagga to kind of focus on what, besides the initial take on the employer-employee relationship and the COVID situation, what does he feel as the kind of alterations are the fundamentals changing or fundamentals remaining the same? Rajesh ji?
These are really testing times, Suhas, and I think there will be some fundamental changes that will happen, and new approaches will need to be taken, because at the end of the day, I think as an employer, I am required to be acting in a very humane and responsible manner in a pandemic of this kind, where my people, who are the backbone of my business, are suffering and are really at their wits' end as to what will happen. We will also understand that there is a lot of anxiety in the minds of people at this time, and the employers' moves need to be very measured and well thought out. While all of us know, as Sudhir Saab has mentioned, that there are huge challenges before the employers of staying afloat. They could go belly up. They could go, they do not have the strength, most of them, to bear the disruption that has happened for 2-3 months, and which has led to cancellation of orders, not getting their raw materials, the factory or the shop line closed for 2-3 months. All that will require investment to restart, and also you have to be sure whether you will have the skilled manpower available at regular intervals to start and deliver what you promised to your consumers. yes, the consumers are waiting for services to start and for goods to flow in, but and it could well be what some people are saying, a V-shaped recovery, but that will all depend on whether I as an employer am strong enough to bear the shock and to get along with work as usual. Be that as it may, I think there would be a whole lot of issues that will arise during the course. And as was mentioned in the papers, that the government has now withdrawn all its caveats which were given to employers, asking them to pay wages on a 100% basis, and that circular also was challenged before the Supreme Court, so I'm not going to dwell on it, because whatever happens to that circular will only be applicable till 19th of March, when the withdrawal has happened. So looking ahead, I think the general law of the land will apply, and that is where I'm coming from, that what do we do in that? So at the opportune moment, we will discuss that.
Yeah, sure. Sure, sir. I think, you see, while I completely agree with you that, this is unprecedented, I'm going to go back to the most experienced person on this panel, Mr. Pagar. He is seen from the government side, uh, you know, right, rising up to Joint Labor Commissioner of the State of Maharashtra. He's he's weathered out all the challenges that industry had seen, whether it was the original trade union challenges that the businesses have foreseen, to the complete laissez-faire affair that probably what people are talking in these days. So, Mr. Pagar, I just want your first initial reaction on this topic of employer-employee relationship.
Sir, thank you, Suhas, and thank you to everybody. Good evening to everybody. The issue today is about COVID-19 effects. This is to be seen in the three phases. One is the pre-phase of the COVID, that you can say before the March, from March, 29th March to the 17th of April, 17th of May, and 17th April, 17th of May, subsequently to that one. In these three phases, we have to see the employer-employership effect of it. So whatever the things are there before the March 2020, that it was a normalcy was there, everywhere the normalcy was there. Subsequently, because of the first lockdown, second lockdown, third lockdown, and this fourth lockdown, this totally has been changing the scenario. In the first lockdown, people were asked not to move. Migrant laborers were asked not to move from anywhere. This continued to be in the state. State has to take care of those peoples. Second one also for that one. In the third phase, in the third lockdown, movement of the people have started it. Essential services and essential industries were, and certain cases, the non-essential will also be started in the third phase. Fourth phase is very clear that barring the prohibited areas, all other places that whether it is in red zones or in the other zones, industry has started it. This keeps in mind with the industries that whether how to continue the production and the service actions. When these two terms are being considered, there is always to be a issues about how to continue with the workers, how to procurement of the workers, how to maintain the workers, and what to do about the workers who places to their hometowns. These are the basic, these things we'll have to require to do with these things.
Sure. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. You see, very briefly, as as Mr. Bagga pointed out, I think the matter relating to what needs to be done or what is to be done during the lockdown period, at least insofar as the Ministry of Home Affairs advisory, the famous advisory of March 29, 2020, is a matter which is sub judice before the Supreme Court. So I think it would be unfair for any one of us today to uh, to get into any interpretative issue qua that circular, or even in reference to what the Ministry of Labor started on March 20th, 2020, even before the Disaster Management Act was invoked, to say that, they say that all the employers and employees or employers are advised to extend their coordination by not terminating the employees during this period, during the period when COVID-19 was considered at that point in time not a national disaster yet. But March 29th advisory that talks about all the employers, be it industry or shops and establishment, shall make payments of wages to their workers, has actually, this has raised some of the constituencies have raised various contentions. Does this apply to the workers, or does this apply to only employees? Does this apply in the context of migrant workers? Does this really apply to contract workers? Does establishment under closure would mean those essential establishments which were never under the closure, this did not apply to them? And during the lockdown as a period, where is there a notification that will come for releasing the lockdown? So all these issues are subject matter of Supreme Court case, and therefore it's a sub judice issue today. All these all these contentions have been raised, and we will wait for the Supreme Court judgment to come to tell us what needs to be done during the lockdown period. And I think, as seasoned as Sudhir is and Mr. Bagga is, I think we know for sure that what will get settled by the Supreme Court here will also have large bearing on what one needs to do qua the contract employees or non-bargainable, as Sudhir says. It will have a large influence on what do we do with the non-bargainable people. Uh, there is a 15th May order which talks about that no coercive action should be taken. But I think what is of importance to all of us now is what is a post-lockdown scenario. And I think referred to Mr. Bagga referring to this May 17 guideline, which says that all orders issued earlier under the NDMA shall cease to have effect from 18/5/2020. And I'm going to open up with you, Mr. Baggaji, is to say that does this mean, therefore, that from 18th May onwards, we don't have to worry about what MHA circular was, what everything else was? Are the employers free today to apply their applicable laws and look at what the situation is?
No, unfortunately not. I think what we will need to take into account is that the some of these legislations, as is evident from the screen, were made in 36, 47, 48. Nobody had envisaged such a situation. But whatever they remain on the statute book, and we will have to, let's say, follow those. So today, an employer, whatever actions he considers, will need to be within the four corners of these legislations. So therefore, what do we do? So number one is, if you decide to reopen, and that is a decision that the employer has to take, whether he will reopen, when will he reopen, how will he reopen. I think that is a critical decision which has to be taken, depending on the circumstances in which your establishment is currently placed. Well, if you are, let's say, in a mall, most of the states are not allowing malls to open, so you cannot open. So you continue to remain shut. But if you are a, let's say, an establishment which is in the green zone, and you are allowed to reopen a factory which is in a green zone, then you have to decide whether you have the investment required to meet the MHA norms on reopening, number one. Number two, do you see that your factory will be able to run given the supply chain disruptions? Number three, will your workers be available for engaging in the manufacturing activities. All those are questions that you'll need to consider before you decide to reopen. Number two, can you reopen 100%? Because some of the states have laid a restriction that only 30% of the workers can be called in or 50% can be called in. And if your industry is labor intensive and the industry cannot run fully with 30% of the workers, then you have a problem at your hand. So if, of course, you can reopen on a 30% or 50% basis, what do you do to the other workmen? How do they get employed? Do they get called in? Because the layoff provisions or the the general law of the land does not talk of partial reopening. Now, if you have to partially reopen, then I think the only way out is to lay off 30 or 70% of the people and call only 30% allowed and do work with them. But you cannot lay off permanently those 70% of the people because they have to run their kitchens. So maybe you need to come up with a scheme that, like we do in factories where we build shifts, that people will come in, let's say 30% will come in on Monday and Tuesday, 30% will come on Wednesday, Thursday, things like that. So come up with a scheme so that every worker try and get every worker to be engaged at least for partially some time so that they can be paid for those number of days of wages, and the rest can either be laid off where they get only 50% of the wage, or you could also say the absentees, if there are absentees, those people will be excluded and absentees will get nothing. So you'll have to critically examine where you're placed, whom to call to work, and if you call to work, on what basis you have to call to work. The first step I think an employer has to take is make up his mind on the system he is going to follow for his establishment, and that system needs to be spelled out either in a notice to employees with a copy to the Labor Department, or in the form of a layoff notice where you lay off a part of the workforce and that layoff notice will go to the Labor Department. If you're more than 100, you'll have to seek their permission. If they're less than 100, you just need to inform them and continue on that basis. So I think it's a very tricky situation, and you will need expert legal help on drafting those letters and circulars. That's all I had to say, Suhas, at this time.
No, thank you very much, sir. Thanks a lot. I think you see one of the fundamental issues that was being talked of, and I think we have information, we have knowledge from the two judgments that have been delivered by Bombay High Court, Aurangabad bench, by the same judge, in respect of no work, no pay fundamental. You see, we all understood as a student of law that this is an implied term. Whether you look at constitutional provisions, whether you look at definition of wages, whether you look at provisions under Payment of Wages Act, you see, it is an implied term of the employment that if there is no work, there is no pay. Of course, there are exceptions that are carved out to say that if the employer is not able to provide the work, then of course this rule will not apply. If there is a layoff, this will not apply. Having said that, very interestingly, there are these two judgments that came down. One which clearly said that during the lockdown, the principle of no work, no pay cannot be made applicable because these are extraordinary circumstances. The logical corollary of it, which came in a prior judgment and order from the same judge, is April 30th, to say that post-lockdown, and these were the cases where what you just now mentioned, that post-lockdown, employer will have to look at what it has to do. Employer may deduct wages if employees remain absent voluntarily after following the due process of law. So I think we are now at the cusp where lockdown 4.0 is beginning of end of lockdown. To that effect, we should be ready to now say that if I have to follow no work, no pay principles, then what is it that I need to take into consideration? I'm going to request Mr. Pagar. Mr. Pagar, is this is this fundamental no work, no pay, would it kind of be now again applicable because the extraordinary circumstance of lockdown is over?
This to be seen from the two angles. One is this employer's inability to provide the work. Number one. Number two, employer for providing the work, but the worker remain absent. These are two basic differences are there. When someone says the employer is unable to provide the work to the workers for any reason whatsoever, whether it is shortage of orders, recession, breakdown of machineries, or any other calamities, then it is a responsibility of the employer to protect the employees as well as to protect their payments. But while protecting the payments, the employer has the right, subject to the conditions, subject to the terms, that he can lay off the workers.
Sir, we'll come back to layoff.
And he pays the 50% of wages to him.
Sir, we'll come to layoff subsequently. But I'm saying,
I'm just comparing these two parts.
Yeah.
And subsequently, when employee's fault is that he doesn't present himself for the work. It is a general principle that no work, no pay.
No,
in the first 29th March 2020 is one that whether you remain, because circumstances made the worker to remain absent.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yes, circumstances made the employer that he cannot provide the work to the workers. So
I agree with you. But that was not employer's choice also. I mean,
it was the
I will not get into that
discussion.
Also. No, I will not get into that discussion because I think during lockdown period is not our headache, so to say. Supreme Court will decide what to do. Having said that, and I want to come back to Mr. Bagga, and again, I think no work, no pay will be applicable provided I do not announce layoff today. I do not announce any retrenchment scheme. I do not go on in terms of disciplinary inquiry and suspension. The fundamental of the no work, no pay law in India today. Having said that, is it therefore in the interest of every employer at this point in time, when you as well as Sudhir agreed that you're hardly getting 50% people coming into your factory today? Because 50% of them are, for whatever reason, are not willing to come and work. In that situation, as an employer, is it prudent for me to today say, sorry, I will not go under layoff, I will not go under retrenchment, I will look at only no work, no pay as a fundamental? At least that will save the burden, and it is fair and reasonable that I am willing to pay to those people who are willing to work with me.
Yeah, so for no work, no pay is an ILO principle, and India has signed up to those treaties, and it's a worldwide phenomenon. It's not only in India. Now, look at the situation. I am an establishment which is asked to perform my work with only 30% of the people on any given working day. That means that I cannot call the balance 70% at all. So I am precluded from calling. So it's a government declared closure of operations. Now, if I call only 30%, then I can pay only those 30% on the basis of no work, no pay. Because I have work, I am mandated by law only to provide work to 30% of the people. Now, therefore, I think the judgments you referred to are in the manner of creating arrangements in the interim. I do not think they should be taken as binding precedents, because those are given without any justification or any arguments having been held on either side. They are, arrangements made in the interim due to the lockdown, because the judges are also hampered, I guess, by the situation and the urgency of the whole issue. Now, given this scenario, I would actually try and invoke no work, no pay for the 70% for whom I cannot be providing work at all. That would be a very, black and white kind of a situation without any humane intervention, as Mr. Soni would like me to have. That, you see, that's the crux of the matter. So what I'm recommending and that is of the legal part, is can I work out a solution with the unions and the workmen? That here is the cake. If 100% is the cake, how do I cut the cake so that each one gets a decent share on an ongoing basis? I think that is the call which most employers are taking, that in these times, I do not want to be seen as a heartless employer either. I have to run my industry going ahead. So I come up with a solution which is give and take and provides for each worker.
Thanks. Thank you very much on that take. Sudhir, I think while we will go on an no work, no pay kind of a fundamental, do you completely agree? For example, now senior management is working from home.
That's right. Let me give you some examples in manufacturing side, which never really thought. Let's take a heavy engineering kind of a organization, or even a retail organization, both of which I work closely with. We never thought that work from home would be ever possible in a manufacturing setup, or even in a retail setup. Okay. And suddenly, when we are forced with this kind of a situation of a lockdown, we realize that maybe there's a 40% of work, even in a manufacturing company, in heavy engineering, which can actually be done from home. Let's look at design, let's look at supply chain management, let's look at HR, let's look at finance, with all the ERP systems which are there, with security protocols in place, it is possible for people to continue to work from home. So suddenly you find that from a virtual zero mindset, that we will not allow work from home due to force of circumstances, we today people are being allowed to work from home, and it's a sizable a sizable number. It's not small. That's one. The second is there has been an exponential increase in terms of the meetings across geographies, which originally would have happened which originally would have happened by way of a travel, have virtually got eliminated today. And I think that is a fundamental change that you're going to see going forward, because let's say if my executive committee was meeting once a month, or once in 2 months, or once in a month physically, today we are meeting, let's say, twice a month over a Zoom call or a video conferencing, and achieving the same amount of output perhaps, or a little more than what we were when we were physically together. So that's one big change that is happening. E-learning. Sorry?
Sudhir, I completely agree with you. On a lighter side, I think, we are working more from home because
productivity is up. Output is up, productivity is up.
Yeah. We're not taking as many smoke breaks. We're not taking, bio breaks as many as we would. We don't have
you don't have that luxury anymore.
We don't have that luxury anymore. So, yes, the productivity.
The other thing is you are eating healthy home food, and therefore you are healthier than what you were before.
That's true. That's also true. That's true.
So that's one of the better side effects of the lockdown that has happened.
Yes. Now, having said that, Sudhir, and I want to start off with you on this furlough. You see, people have been talking about it. There are some Indian companies that have come out with a statement saying that we are looking at this very seriously. There is very innocuous provision under model standing orders relating to stoppage of work, where if there is a stoppage of work, then we can actually adjust your absence against your leaves, with paid leaves first, then with unpaid leaves. And like what you said, you're looking at next year's paid leaves to be adjusted today. So furlough is something which is alien to at least Indian law, except for that little bit dovetailed into the model standing orders. Having said that, is this Is this now going to be a new norm that somebody will have to look at?
I think there are two things which are definitely happening and which I'm experiencing myself. One is the structure of compensation for management itself is likely to undergo a fundamental change in terms of introduction of a fixed and variable component rather than having those hundreds of allowances and such like. And the variable component is likely to be linked to performance and a percentage achievement over a financial year. The second is I'm definitely also seeing a shift in the mindset with regard to leave. Save and accept what is mandated by law. There would be a consolidation, so to say that instead of that 1 day for every 20 days work, 6 days of casual leave under so and so act, and so on. I think there would be a consolidation of leave to say that this is all inclusive and that none of those old rules of prefix and suffix will apply and minimum 3 days and not more than twice in a year, etc. will all go out of the window. Perhaps it's already gone out. And a quantum of leave will come into play, a simple earned leave or a privileged leave with a very clear limitation in terms of accumulation.
Okay.
That would happen. I see these two changes happening over a period of time. And thirdly, of course, work from home in the ITS sector may get accelerated and liberate a lot of space in the offices.
Commercial space.
And commercial space. And that would save a significant amount of money for the companies.
Yeah, sure. Mr. Pakar, I want your view only on this aspect that today under Indian law, there is no concept of furlough.
Yes.
Would this come up? Now it's come up for discussion. A lot of people, and I think there are two clients who came forward and sought our opinion when we actually went back and said there is no provision under Indian law today, except for that little bit there under the model standing orders. So do you foresee the legislations getting changed?
Yeah, probably it will get changed, but it requires a lot of deliberation on this issue first. What is a furlough is to be understood by the workmen's management sides also and unions also. All the three have to understood what is a furloughs. Because once this concept has been understood, then the thought of accepting the furlough will be there. First, it is required to be accepted as a concept. Then the practically it will be there. Till the time, probably it will not be there. And it may take more time for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sir, sorry, I'm just rushing a bit because I think we're now constrained for time. Having said that, I want to look at this entire gamut. And I want to actually, three of you should comment from, let's say, Sudhir, I would request you to comment upon from a management point of view with respect to the entire situation today, whether we talk about furlough, no work, no pay, talk about layoff, talk about retrenchment, talk about termination, because there are some companies who are talking about terminating large number of employees today, large number of middle and senior management today. And I think one of the audiences actually wrote back to say that it's not everything is hanky-dory. There are employers who are terminating middle and senior management people. You see, therefore, from the management's perspective, and Mr. Pakar, I would want you to look at from a regulatory perspective or labor authority perspective. And Rajeshji, I would request you to look at it from the employer perspective, which is slightly different from a management perspective.
Suhas, can I go?
Yeah, Sudhir, please.
First of all, I personally refuse to accept that COVID can be the cause for downsizing manpower at the middle management and senior management level, merely because it has just occurred and we have had to shut operations and therefore...
No, Sudhir, I think the reality is you do not have ability to pay their salaries. You see, you
Yeah,
want muscle. You want to retain muscle. There is no doubt about it. You want to retain muscle in the company. But the fact that I don't have today, my purse doesn't allow me to pay.
Yeah, but actually, if I were to go a little deeper, my purse did not allow me to pay even in the month of January, February, or December 2019. Provide sufficient attention or focus on that area merely because the revenues were flowing in and I was able to manage with whatever I was doing in terms of expenses. This hiatus, so to say, of the lockdown has given me an opportunity to sit back and think as to what are the real value adding jobs and positions, and are we having simply layers on layers, delaying the process of decision making, delaying work, creating work, so to say, so that every person has an empire, etc., etc. There are a lot of these issues which are underlying issues which companies, including myself, at some point in time would have refused to accept as a potent issue until a crisis hit, and then all of us got a fiat or a diktat, and then you said, yeah, really, why do we require this position and that position and so on. So to my mind, looking at managerial productivity has always been a bone of contention between the executive and the HODs and the other operating people. I don't think it's something new that has come up only because of COVID. It's an ongoing issue. When it comes to really looking at the cost, when the things are good, we keep sanctioning manpower left, right, and center under the guise of additional workload, additional activities being undertaken without really examining as to whether that position is going to add proportionate value to the spend that we are incurring. And I think that kind of a realization has happened or occurred due to this hiatus and lockdown. And people are questioning themselves, so to say, as to why do I need to look at such a large manpower, or whether I need to relook at the skill set which I want. And this is true even, by the way, for the workforce. There are several, even when I say 33% of the people coming to work, and then a next round of 33, I may actually have only out of 33, 25%, which is the really skilled workforce, and which I cannot say you come after, come for 3 days and then come after another 4 days. It's not possible, because without those people, the factory cannot actually function. And therefore, those people will be required willy-nilly. It's only the push and pull, lift and carry kind of jobs where you can have a rotation. While in the skill level, I dare say that rotation would be a possibility.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sudhir, for that kind of a outlay. Bagga Saab, I think.
I think, as I mentioned earlier, the employer has to really look at what he can do in the circumstances and what he can afford to do in the circumstances. I think he may not have too many choices. He will have to work out who are the people he needs in the establishment and who he can do without, who can work from home, who cannot work from home. Because if he is a manual or supervisory worker, I don't think there is anything on the shop floor. He cannot work from home. So therefore, I think those are the kind of situations that will be faced, number one. Number two, if you cannot work out a settlement or a working method with the staff and the unions, you will have to take into account the restrictions placed by the government, and that will justify the route you take, whether it is no work, no pay, whether it is layoff, or whether it is retrenchment, because some industries are bound to shrink. If a whole lot of people are going to work from home, I think the commercial complexes will not need the infrastructure they presently support. So therefore, or if the airlines are going to seat only half the number of passengers, that means half the number of people in the service industry to airlines are actually not required. So therefore, I think there will be fundamental differences between what we could do and what we can now do, and that will justify the actions of the employer. But one caveat I want to put in, please do not put anything in writing without having thought through, and whatever you take a decision on must be justified with valid business and cogent reasons.
Sir, thank you very much for that advice, because coming from you, who not only handled the legal departments but actually handled HR for large company like Tata Motors. Actually, I mean, we're proud that one of our kind of comrades handled HR department of a complex organization like that. So I mean, I'm sure audience are going to take your views and very, very seriously. That's for sure. And it's a very sane advice. Having said that, Mr. Pagar, would government now change its attitude, or will continue to look at saying we don't care what happens to the business? We would go by the letter of law to say that you got to pay, or you got to retrench, pay the retrenchment compensations. Will the governments understand the predicament of businesses, or will it go by the letter of law in protecting the workmen and their interest, and continue to look at it as a letter of law?
So government is look from the win-win situation. Government is not going to deter to either of the one. Government has to look into the interest of the business development as well as the workers' protection or the workers' welfare also. Both things will go together.
Okay.
Till the time it is going together. Yes. So government is going to give a certain boost to the industry. For giving the boost to the industry, naturally things are required. Which things are required? Basically the finance and the manpower. Finance will be not with the labor department, but the manpower arrangement is with the labor department. And labor department is also not that very, in the earlier stage, as it was strict about these things, it is not now.
Okay.
So liberalization is being given to the industries. Even in terms of the working hours, most of the state governments in the India has allowed a 12 hours working under these circumstances in today.
Sir,
60 hours a week to 115 hours a quarter.
I agree.
Has been allowed.
Sir, UP has
why it is there? Because presuming that all the people from either from the zones may not be able to come to the factory for the work. So whoever is available into the industry, let us take more work and pay more to them also.
No, sir, fair point.
Suhas, I want to just say one thing.
Yes.
And I think, sure. Sudhir, please go ahead.
Yeah, there are, whilst I maintain what I said in terms of COVID being a kind of a pause, but there are certain industries that will definitely get impacted adversely as a consequence of COVID. And that one of the industries that I can think of is the restaurant business. The second is the malls and the theater, the multiplex business is going to get impacted very badly. The third is the gems and jewelry business, with whom I am closely associated, is bound to get impacted badly. Because 35 billion US dollars worth of exports takes place on an annual basis of gems and jewelry every year. So there may be certain segments which are bound to get impacted on account of low demand or a change in the wave of working itself, or lack of consumers.
No, agreed.
So there you'll have to look at downsizing and so on and so forth.
Say, agreed. Sudhir, I think we're running out of time, so I'm going to skip a couple of major items we can discuss this later on in subsequent webinars. One of the fundamentals that's coming up is actually is the universal basic income theory now will become applicable to at least the middle and the senior management teams. But I think you touched upon it, Sudhir, briefly by saying, lower fixed pay and higher variable itself is now going to be the new norm, and I completely take that point. I'm going to skip couple of slides and actually look at, yes, their work from home. We've talked. There is early retirement talk that's going on. There are radical kind of practices that might be implemented today. The state amendment, we'll just touch upon this for 5 minutes, and I think we'll move on to the Q&A session. And I think the state amendments, Pagar Sahab, like UP saying work for more hours, we'll pay you more.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
UP was forced to withdraw that circular. I think there is a lot of criticism, not only from the unions, but even from some of the employers to what is the purview currently on exempting some of the industries from, let's say, provisions of Factories Act, provisions of ESI. I think I'm not too sure whether these are the kind of reactions coming out of COVID. Is it well thought through, or it's just trying to do something because you have to do something?
No, it is not to do with something. It is done with a very thoughtful way only, because when the industries were asked to open it, naturally there is a problem of the manpower is there. Third lockdown was in continuous process, and third lockdown was very in a serious situation also. It allowed it to operate the industries. One is the essential industry was to be operated regularly. When in non-red zone, when non-essential industries were asked to allowed to be operated subject to the condition laid down for the compliances about the health and the wealth, about the health. So when these things were done, naturally the time consumption was much more than the production level. We were cleaned up. The machine maintenance has started it, and then the production level has to be started. First was the cleanliness, second was the maintenance, and then third was the production level. So while coming to the production level, more than 15 days to 20 days have taken place for cleaning the premises and the maintenance of the machines. Then subsequently the started when movement of the peoples by transport. Initially it was transport to be provided by the employer and the state to be provided by the employer at the close to the factory premises. Subsequently it was amended. Then cars were allowed, four-wheelers were allowed. Then now two-wheelers have been allowed. So people have been allowed to move. Subsequent changes have been taking place gradually. But when the amendments took place, that time this situation was not there. Because once the person goes to the place and is to return it back to him, it was difficult for him and to the employer also to make the traveling from his home to the factory premises or from factory to the home. So considering that part, the 12-hour shift was been allowed in all the states. This is the basic one thing. But in other things, other than these things, no major issues have been come up, except the UP and MP's governments, which have made certain little bit more changes to the labor laws. But that was not the effect of the COVID. It was to bring the foreign investment to the nation, to their states.
Okay, I understand.
Yes. But it is not for the interest of the, I will say that it is not the interest of the Indian business or to the workers' interest, but it was for the purpose of bringing out the FDI from the China and other places to industry to their respective states. So that has taken place.
Do you agree, Rajesh, that this will actually promote FDI?
Yeah, certainly, because I think there are certain industries which needed the flexibility, like, industries which are heavily into manpower intensive kind of activity, like sugar mills and things like that. And if those mills, or if you have the paddy season which has gone by, people who are converting paddy into rice. Now, those people did need these flexibilities because they wanted the people, the workers, but the workers were not available because they have worked. So therefore, I think there is a justification for that. And also the employers, I'll say, even if these, let's say permissions stay on the statute book for some time, they have to use them carefully, because their actions could be scrutinized later in the court and things like that.
Fair point. Sudhir, your take on these amendments?
One, I think I will.
Sorry, I missed you.
Sudhir, your take on these new amendments? Some of them have been withdrawn, some of them have continued.
Yeah, I mean, I personally thought it is a knee-jerk reaction in more ways than one. Just to give solace to the employers in some way from the draconian way in which wage payment was to be done irrespective of revenue and irrespective of work, etc. I personally thought it was a knee-jerk reaction, not a thought-of reaction.
Okay.
But that's my personal.
Okay, we'll see as the things will move forward. But from my side, I must thank you, all three of you, Mr. Pagar, Mr. Bagga, and Mr. Soni. Thank you very much. I think I've overshot my time, or time given to us. JD, I'm extremely sorry for that. I think we happy to take question and answer, because I'm really encouraged to tell you, saying that we still have, after such a prolonged discussion, almost about 125 participants continuing to be interested in what we are talking about. So thank you very much for this lively discussion. Thanks to all three of you for coming over and gracing this webinar. Over to you, JD, and I think we'll go on and see if Q&As have to be answered. Thanks a lot, JD.
Thank you, JD. Thank you to us.
JD, thank you.
Certainly, thank you so much. And I think we also have a lot of viewers on YouTube live, so we should count them in as well. I think a lot of people are interested in getting their questions answered. We have a few. I'm going to try and read it out over here just to be efficient. The first one is from Hari Kumar. Regarding the central government order asking employers not to reduce salary or terminate employment of employees during the lockout period, central government has reduced the said order effective 18th May. I think Mr. Hari Kumar, we discussed that, but he has a following this thing, which he says that are there any updates about state governments revoking such orders restraining employers from reducing salary or terminating employment? We'll request the panel to answer, but Mr. Hari Kumar, you should take the opportunity to visit the COVID-19 Resource Center Legasis has set up. It's absolutely free of cost out there. We've got more than 1,000 plus notifications, hundreds of more judgments as well available. All of these notifications are available instantly at the end of the day. So feel free to take leverage that resource center. The question that Mr. Hari Kumar has, what would the implication if the state government is not revoking such restraining orders? So Haas, Mr. Dhoni, would you like to answer that?
Very briefly, I think if the central government, let's say Ministry of Home Affairs, has used powers given to it under the NDM Act, which is specifically section 10 into bracket 2 into bracket small l, I think the states will have to follow that. And as we see in lockdown 4.0, the wordings are quite clear from MHA circular, from MHA COVID direction, so to speak, that therefore states will have to follow that. States may go under their own zoning pattern, which is a permissible elbow room available to the states, but they will be fully justified in those zonings as well as the local lockdown conditions. Yeah, JD, we can move to the next question.
Thank you. The next one is from Abhishri Kulkarni. Her question is, what could be the potential effects on establishment that has already initiated closure process by giving notice under section 25 or before COVID?
Mr. Pagar, you want to answer that?
Yeah, certainly I will answer it. It will not have any effect. It will not have any effect since the issue has been initiated before the COVID-19. So the process will continue to be there because whatever circumstances arrived in that industry before the COVID were there. This is not after the COVID. So things will continue to be there as usual. It will not hamper because of the COVID.
Yeah, sure. I think
Yes.
Rajesh ji.
I just wanted to come in there, Mr. Pagar. Unless, of course, the scenario painted in the reasons given for closure are further strengthened by the COVID.
or those scenarios simply go away.
No, those scenarios were earlier. No, that has not gone away. Probably it has worsened it.
Yes.
It has worsened it.
Agreed, sir. Agreed.
Yes.
JD, and move to the next question.
Right. The next question is from Arun Kulkarni. He asks, as more and more nations are becoming protectionists, the conditions prevailing prior to 1991, and I think he refers to the 1991 period of India, may come back. Will the collectivism in workmen will come back? I mean, will the workmen kind of become a collective again and unionism will go up? What do the panelists think? How will this generation of entrepreneurs handle this issue?
Yes,
Hello. Who take?
Sudhir, you want to take that question?
Sorry, what is the question? I missed. I was typing.
In short, will the unionism kind of go up again?
I think unions have come to a stage of maturity after 1995 to 2020. There has been a huge shift in the way even unions think today, as against what I would have seen in the 80s and even up to mid 90s. So I think maturity of unions has increased in most of the organizations. Second, I think there is a very large recognition on part of the employers to be more increasingly fair and not violate laws at will. I think they are far more compliance oriented, because every large organization today you will see has a compliance portal, has mandatory declarations, not only within the organization but also within the supplier organizations and so on. And I think that was a major part which was being contested by the unions in the yesteryears, which really is on a low as of today. The next one the unions recognize is fairness, transparency, and honesty in dealings. As long as that's there, I think agreements, however negotiation tough they may be, they do at the end of the day come to an amicable settlement, which is reasonably win-win from both employer and employee perspective.
Sure.
I think unions have come a long way. I have no doubt on that in my mind.
No, thanks, Sudhir. Rajesh ji, you want to add to that?
No, I fully support what Mr. Soni is saying. And the only thing I would like to say is that the amount of money floating in the economy today is far more. And there is a tremendous jump in the living conditions and also the disposable incomes. This COVID situation is a blip. I think hopefully we will be past it in about 2 to 3 quarters. And the unions also know that they have to engage for a longer term and not for a short term.
Thank you.
So I will take differently a little bit way, because now we are talking about the unions, workers who are organized unions, where the unions have been organizing the people on a larger scale, who are there to unions negotiations taking place, settlements are taking place, aspirations have been increased, fulfillment of aspirations is there. But apart from those working class, there is a class which is much more is there, is unorganized labor, contract laborers, casual laborers, is the more is of the number. That is the more disturbing number to us. So that care is required to be taken, and where the unionization is more required in those fronts.
Completely agree with you.
Because now there are two ways of the working workforce. One is who is sitting in who is working in the good factories. Other is who is working in the normal factories, MSMEs, small factories, micro factories, brick factories, and all other places, shops and commercial establishments, all where. Because these are two different classes are becoming now in the force.
Agreed, sir.
Yeah, because once I do it that a workman or operator working in the factory, he is designated as executive.
Yeah.
And he terms himself as an executive in the company to all his friend circles.
That's true.
But when the issue comes, he remains a worker only for the purpose of for his grievance.
Yeah.
Only for distinction, he's an executive. Otherwise, for the grievance, he's a workman only. And what benefits he's getting it is more important than his own designation.
No, sir, completely. I think that's a very good perspective.
That perspective we have to see it.
There is a complete divide in the gap.
There a big gap is going up.
Yeah.
Because one thing we're seeing it in the last 5, 7, 8 years in the Pune region industry, where good settlements are taking place, which are not in a 5 figure, not in about 9 to 10,000 rupees of total package for 3 years. But how much wage increase is given to the contract laborers and the temporary workers, if you see it? What percentage is there? So that discrimination is increasing amongst that's working class, working in the same premises, working for the same employers.
Agreed, sir. I completely agree with you. And I think we've experienced this time and again. Yes. And that will give rise to a different union's perspective, so to speak.
Yes, that is more important. Yes.
Thanks a lot, sir. JD.
Right. I think we have one question that talks about the provision of gratuity. It's more of an opinion rather than a question. So it says that with current financial package announcement, how far is it legit to say that the provisions of gratuity on completion of 1 year service is better as against 5 years? Any view on that from a legal?
That's a personal call. That's a personal call of the employee. In any case, I think these days youngsters don't stick for 5 years anyways.
That's true. That's true. 5 years is a long-term strategic plan, sir.
Yes. Now, even apart from this, young people, even the contract laborers are there, casual laborers are there, who doesn't been work more than 1 or 2 years or 3 years in one place.
That's true.
So it gets the additional benefits to them. Otherwise, they have to forgo their own gratuities.
Yeah.
This is what is happening in today.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
JD?
Right. The next question is from Delna from the chat group and Kailash on the Q&A. Essentially, both talking about how would the furlough arrangement work. I think you touched upon it a little bit during this, but I think this could be a subject of a dedicated webinar by itself. Sure. But any quick adds from what we spoke?
Yeah. I think we answered this partly saying that there's no Indian law position currently. But I think there could be possibility of something new happening there. Yeah, we can move on to the next.
I think Suhas, it would suffice to say that it's developing space, and I think it will require legislative changes to really make it workable.
Sir, but I'm saying what Sudhir has been saying, what you do for senior management, can you really extend to bring out an individual settlement between employer and an individual employee to say that I will, today recognize and credit like the 2P section 18.1, 18.2 kind of settlement, individual basis to say that your next 2 years leaves will be counted as a paid leave today for this period.
It's a debatable area because some state governments in the past have actually prosecuted employers for having club kinds of leave and also the dispensation of leave. So I think it's a difficult area.
I understand, and because you can't contract out of some of these legislation.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Sure, we'll take one last question, and I know panelists, it's been a long evening for you as well, but just one last question. This is an interesting one. It kind of balances between the legal obligations between an employer-employee versus a moral obligation. I think the question is that with business structures changing, practices changing, shouldn't the employers take the employees into confidence before making these kind of decisions? I think this requires an all-rounded view. We have the right expert panel over here. We'll take this last question and then we wrap. Suhas, Baggaji, Toniji, Pagar sir, any views on this?
I think Sudhir should go first.
Yeah, I firmly believe that in all well-run organizations, the channels of communication horizontally and vertically through various mediums are well-oiled. For example, a town hall like an initiative gives opportunity for people across levels, across functions, across geographies to talk to the top leadership team in an open forum and get their views clarified. Town hall also becomes a very important method of communication for the changes that are happening in the organization. What is the financial position? What is the order book? What is the consumer preference changing? In what manner is the competition happening, etc., etc. Which all these things bring about an awareness and a larger picture to an ordinary employee to understand and align with the goals of the organization. And that is really what engagement is all about. And therefore, I feel communication really is the key to overcoming any kind of an issue. In fact, even in COVID, what I've observed is the more the communication with the rank and file on what needs to be done, what on restarting, what are the kind of precautions to be done, what is the likely cost of all this sanitization of buses, offices, hand wash, hand sanitization, mask, gloves, etc., etc. It makes people sensitive to the use of all these items, and overall cost to the company gets definitely impacted in a positive manner. So communication is really the key.
Thanks.
Hello.
I think I just wanted to add something that I think as employees and as employers, it is very clear to the employee right from the beginning of his employment, or let's say a quarter or two down the line, what is the company's culture? What is the employment culture in the organization? Each organization has a very different approach to that issue. I think what Sudhir Sahab spoke of could be the case in Tata's, could be the case in big multinationals like Unilever, where we both were there. But in many Indian organizations, that is not the norm. That is not the norm. So therefore, I think we as employees have to live within the culture which the organization has put in place. It is not for us to change it. And we know what will happen in that particular culture. So I think every organization is successful on the basis of the way it has chosen for itself, and the employees need to fall in line.
Very well said.
Yeah. Sir, what the policy of the company is there, it is always a profit driven mostly, not the welfare driven.
No, sir.
Mostly it is there. It's always a profit
balancing
driven.
out today.
It's always the profit driven is the first.
See,
Then second it comes to where all the either the managers or in consumers, or then subsequently is there.
No, Pagar sir.
Yes.
Say, but only the worst of them actually come before you.
Sir, that is the problem.
That is the problem. Yes, that is the issue. We have to accept it. When you are doing well, nothing happens. But when something goes wrong, then things crop up.
Yes.
See, Pagar sir, just on the lighter side, you see, Mr. Bagga, Mr. Soni, and me, all three of us worked at Hindustan Unilever.
Okay.
That culture is ingrained in all three of us.
Okay.
Okay. Subsequently, we have worked wherever we have worked. In a sense, we have worked with Indian promoters, we have worked with professional organizations, we have worked everywhere. So we have seen it from all sides, but I think culturally, what is in three of us
Yes.
is what was ingrained at the initial stage, and I think it has stayed with us. Therefore, all three of us are very positive. We have
Like
never come to you as a rogue. We have come to you to
this
solve our
Unilever,
problems.
this Unilever example I'm telling you is in 1987-88. 1987-88, whosoever, either of three, whosoever was
Yeah,
there,
I was very
you-
much there, and I have seen all what happened.
what happened? It,
We were all
So
there.
those were exceptional circumstances like lockdowns.
where the golden
Sir.
handshake was initiated. The subsequently golden handshake was the first word used by the Hindustan Lever. That was Hindustan Lever used
But
in
I
the
think
economy. Total economy, it was in golden handshake.
Let's not get into that.
No, that not to go into that. Yes. Since Suhas has spoken about that, you all three about the Unilever.
No, all three of us are deeply involved in what you are saying.
In 87, I was totally deeply involved. 87, 88 issue, 89 issue, I was deeply involved in that matter issues.
I know that.
Yes, yes, sir.
okay, JD.
Yeah.
JD can't hear you. Your mic is off.
There you go.
Ah,
The friendly people can continue. Thank you so much.
thank you.
It was a very nice session. I thank all the participants, and thank you to the expert panel for taking time off. I think it's much more than what we asked you for. Thank you again. Have a great evening ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sudhir, sir, give me your phone number, yeah.
98230.
Just
Then I'll type out and give you.
Otherwise, okay. Otherwise, you have my number.
I have your number. I'll give you a
You have my
call.
number. Please give me a call or SMS.
I'll give you a call, sir.
Pagga sir, you also provide it to me, sir. Hello, Pagga sir.
Yes.
I'll
connect you.
गेला तुमच्याकडे फोन माझा आला सुद्धा.
Okay, ठीक आहे. I'll check up that. Right, sir.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Right,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye. See you, sir. Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. See you, Suhas.
Good night,
You
Sudhir.
very-
Thank you.
राजेश जी बाय. पगार साहेब या भेटायला जॉगर्स पार्क मध्ये. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Chalo, bye. Thanks a lot, Sudhir.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
a
you,
lot.
everyone.
Bagga sahab, thank you very much. JD, thanks, sir. It was very interesting, very lively.
Thank you. Thank you. See you. Good night.
Bye. Good night.